Eugene Baudrillard was born in Reims, France on July 27, 1929. After teaching German in a French school, he got his doctorate's degree in sociology. He then later became an assistant at Nanterre University in Paris. After he left this school, he taught at the European Graduate School until he died on March 7, 2007. In Baudrillard's teaching, there are two main themes in his most popular works. These are hyperreality and simulation. I'll define the two terms first. Hyperreality is a term associated with the effects of mass culture reproduction, suggesting that an object, event, or experience is reproduced so much that it is preferred to its original, that the copy is more real than real. In simulation, he defines it as the action or practice of simulating with an intent to deceive. But what does this actually mean? Putting it in more simple terms, there is no distinction between reality and simulation. Everything in the modern age is mingled together so that you cannot tell the difference between a reality and a virtual reality. Baudrillard gives an example of Disney World. It's built with fake houses, rides, and attractions that all represent a fake version of reality that was first presented in the Disney films, which is just a virtual representation of something. This false representation takes the guests into a fake simulated world that they believe is more real than anything the natural world can provide. Walt Disney created this park to turn his imagination into real life, and the park is basically a real-life simulation of something imaginary. This is where it gets tricky and hard to understand. Baudrillard goes even deeper than this. In his most famous piece of writing, Simulacra and Simulation, he argues that the meaning of almost everything around us is completely absent. This is because their connection with the real world becomes blurred with the unreal, and it may become more important to take on the symbols than to achieve the reality. Some people, for example, may believe that they can be rock stars or celebrities just by acting as if they are. In the modern world, much of reality is meditated in some way. Information is edited and packaged into news programs. So what is real is often processed and shaped to fit a particular narrative structure, so it's not actually real. It's just a copy. In hyperreality, the copy becomes more important and valuable than the real thing, and what something symbolizes is more important than what the thing actually is. For example, if someone wants to be viewed as a basketball player, they can turn themselves into a sign or symbol of one by dressing in a basketball jersey and basketball shoes. Often, people believe this is more important than being the basketball player itself. It's all about the image. Baudrillard has had a big influence on postmodern thinking and especially postmodernism philosophy. He's the most well-known proponent of the hyperrealism philosophy and has analyzed modern American culture like no other philosopher has done before him. He has been very important in the current post-structuralist movement of history, philosophy, economics, art, literature, and more. His biggest influence that most people know about is The Matrix. His philosophy regarding simulation and simulacra is seen widely throughout the movie, and they do credit him for his ideas that were used. Michel Foucault was born on October 15, 1926 in Poitiers, West Central France, in an upper-middle-class family. He later attended a French institution, College Saint Stanislas, and studied philosophy, history, and economics. His father, who he strongly disliked, wanted him to become a surgeon, but instead he went to Paris to study philosophy, and was influenced enough by Hegel and Marx to become a full-time philosopher. Foucault is most well known for his work in biopower. Biopower is basically the idea that the state decides what is right and what is wrong, and so everyone that lives under the state believes that to be true. This is more easily explained in an example. If the state or someone started the idea that, say, football was a terrible thing and it was very evil and people started believing it, then politicians would be elected that had an anti-football agenda because the people wanted football to be destroyed because it was just such a terrible thing. And then, sometime later, say 60 years, someone would try and start a revolution for pro-football. And then everybody would think he was insane for thinking that football was a fun and entertaining sport. We would throw him in jail and maybe even a mental asylum because he thought that football was a good thing. The problem is not just at the state, but it's that the people started actually believing that football was a bad thing in the first place. We all have these ideas of right and wrong and normal, and we choose a state according to those, and sometimes we mess up what is right, wrong, and normal. And when the state has the power to control what citizens do, and we justify that power with, oh, it's for your own good and for everybody's good, there is no limit to what the state can justify, and if you don't like it, then you must not be healthy, and you must be insane. Foucault is very important with his books and teachings. He is one of the most important and influential philosophers of the 20th century. He has influenced many activists and academic groups, and his teachings continue to be taught throughout the world. His critique of the human sciences provoked a lot of research within anthropology, and he inspired a new generation of scholars. His discussion about politics has had a noticeable impact on the studies of colonialism, law, technology, gender, and race. Jacques Lacan was born on April 13, 1901 in Paris, France. He became a forensic psychiatrist and later started releasing papers on psychology and started becoming more philosophical in his teachings. He based a lot of his ideas off of the most famous psychoanalyst, Freud, and developed the idea of psychoanalysis even further. One of the most famous teachings of Lacan is on the subject of psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is described by these points. First, a person's development is determined by events in early childhood. Second, human attitude, experience, and mannerism and thought is largely influenced by irrational drives, which are basically acting without thinking. Attempts to bring these drives that we do without thinking into awareness causes psychological resistance in the form of defensive mechanisms, which basically means that we perform certain acts to stop ourselves from doing something, but we are unaware that we are doing it. Also, conflicts between the conscious and the unconscious can cause mental or emotional disturbances, for example, neurosis, anxiety, and depression. The way that psychoanalysis is conducted is usually through therapy. The therapist brings all the unconscious material to the conscious mind through different psychological practices. Another one of Lacan's famous theories is that of the mirror stage. This says that human infants pass through a stage in which an external image of the body, which is reflected in a mirror, produces a psychic response that gives rise to the mental representation of an ego. The infant identifies with the image, which allows him to start learning about himself. But, Lacan says as we grow older, this reliance on mirrors affects the way our personality develops and how we act. For example, your favorite celebrity may be a mirror because you may purchase the same clothing as her and start to act like her, or because you may see her as your role model. This role model to Lacan is just another mirror. His influence has been especially marked in literary criticism, film theory, art history, philosophy, and in some areas of social and political thought. Several schools of psychoanalysis have evolved because of him. He was a big influence in the post-structuralist philosophy movement and basically took a lot of Freud's ideas and branched off of them, teaching new concepts and refreshing old concepts that made psychoanalysis important again.